Okay, we're going to get started. I want to welcome Councillor McMahon back to the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee. Welcome back officially from our group here, our team, Public Works. And I just want to officially call the meeting to order. We have 7 items. We have, of course, as always, you can follow us on www.toronto.ca/council. Any declarations of interest? Seeing none. If someone could confirm the minutes. Councillor Carmichael Greb, all those in favour? Passed, and now we're going to run through the agenda. So the first item is PW 30.1, Amendment to Purchase Order 6031-221, and this is the Highland Creek Treatment Plant. I would move that. All those in favour? That carries. PW 30.2, Contract Award for Tender Call 24-2018, Transmission Watermain, and this again is the Scarborough Pumping Station to St. Clair Avenue to Midland Avenue. Somebody like to move that? Councillor Holiday, all those in favour? That carries. PW 30.3, this is a contract award for the FG Gardiner Expressway Rehabilitation Project. I would move that. All those, there's a deputation? We gotta hold. Oh, we have to hold for one deputation. Okay, let's do that. We'll hold that in my name as the chair. PW 30.4, addition of new materials to the city's waste diversion program. Do we have deputations on that? I think maybe I'll hold that for a minute. PW 30.5, Vision Zero Road Safety Plan, the designation of community safety zones around elementary schools. We have one speaker on that. So I'll hold that in my name as the chair. PW 30.6, Cycling Network Plan, York University, Downsview, and other neighborhoods. One speaker on that. It seems like might be the same speaker on a number of these. PW 30.7, Traffic Control Signals, Bayview Avenue and Davisville Avenue. Okay, Councillor Carmichael Greb moved that. And well, they both put their hands up at the same time, but he got the last one. So I will move that. We have a couple items to add to the agenda on your pink sheets. Improving the city's response to future extreme weather events. This is actually properly before us. It was just a misstep by the clerk's department, I guess. I'm not trying to point fingers, but it was a little bit of an oversight on this. So if we could vote to support this going on the agenda so it's properly before us, but it is actually, it's on the agenda. Okay. So do we have to vote? No. We don't. Just to adopt it later. Okay, so we can adopt that later. And then there's another motion, notice of motion from Anthony Peruzza, which I just literally had handed to me. I don't know anything about it. It's on the pink sheet. There's no seconder. Your mic's not on.
Oh. I want to add something else as well. It's being delivered from my office, so just want to give notice. And it's basically a note asking that we include motorcycles and scooters as part of the King Street pilot project and allow them on the street instead of having to turn like cars and stuff. So that's coming, okay?
Oh, okay. So why don't we hold those down till we have both of them and we'll add them at that time. So we're going to start
No, this one can be added now. It's in front of you now, right? That one's good.
So then you need to move a motion.
Oh, I thought you had done that.
No, we haven't. We just got to it now.
I thought that Councillor McMahon had said that she...
Well, you're on the committee. You can move the motion.
Oh, I'm happy to do that.
Well, it's your motion. You should be happy.
Yes.
So move it. You have to move it.
I've moved it. I move it.
You have to say, I move to add this to the agenda.
I move to add this to the agenda.
Thank you.
Okay, sure.
All those in favor?
Thanks.
What does it mean?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't. That's what I just literally had it handed to me.
What exactly does all of this mean? Every meeting is the same thing. People just come in here, plop things down, and we don't know what it means. What does it mean?
Okay, I'm going to suggest we hold this down until we get further information on this. And we're going to go head into the agenda. So we've dealt with 30, we've dealt with 30.2, so we're on 30.3. We have one speaker on 30.3, Hamish. You've got 5 minutes. Welcome.
Yes, good morning. I know the Gardiner needs work. I'm just frustrated that we aren't actually managing to adhere to the Places to Grow Act, sections 3.2.2 and 3.2.3, which when we do maintenance, we're supposed to actually make sure that we think about transit and bikes. This seems to be totally lacking in this particular project, and overall in the city, we aren't necessarily doing this sort of thing automatically, so you'd have an even lighter agenda, Councillor Robinson. We'd just be doing these things automatically, and there shouldn't be fussing about it. Quite honestly, if we keep catering to cars, this is what we're getting. It's congestion. The problem with just catering to cars, as you probably know, they can take up a lot of space, especially when they move quickly. The problem is obviously the cars, and we need to have the transit. This is news from, I guess, 1958 or so, and some of you have seen this before. Mr. Gardiner is saying, well, there is no mystery about what has caused the problem. There are 500,000 motor vehicles in Canada, 500,000 of which are domiciled in Metro Toronto. So cars cause congestion. If we don't think about improving transit when we actually do these sorts of major projects, we're not going to solve the congestion. So I'm sure you'll probably go ahead and give the money away and give the resources to the cars, but I just thought I'd make that observation. Thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none, I'll move to questions of staff. Seeing none, Councillor Mamalady, go ahead. You've got 5 minutes.
What does this mean? How much money are we spending on the Gardiner over and over again?
Through the chair, in 2016 we came to council and came up with a revised rehabilitation plan for the Gardiner. The Gardiner, at that point, we had completed an assessment from 427 right through to the DVP. We incorporated the outcome of the Gardiner ESDA. Basically, the section from Jarvis over to the DVP is literally at the end of its service life and needs to be rehabilitated. This contract award deals with the first phase of that. It's the section between Jarvis and Cherry Street, but 1.1 kilometers. It's basically to rebuild what is there because it is at the end of its service life. The transportation 10-year capital plan includes about $2.3 billion for the overall rehabilitation of the Gardiner over the next 10 years.
So you're rebuilding?
The section between Jarvis and Cherry Street, basically rebuilding what's there right now.
How much is that going to cost?
The contract award is $280 million.
You know I can't even get potholes fixed in my community? Does anybody know that?
Is that rhetorical or?
No, it's serious.
So who are you asking?
I don't know. Can I take $1 million and out of it and put it into potholes in my ward?
There's a budget set aside for potholes in the
Just asking.
transportation budget.
Just asking.
Quite a healthy budget.
Maybe you can come up and fill some potholes in my ward, Madam Chair.
Okay, any other questions of staff? Seeing none, then I would move to adopt the recommendations in the staff report for PW 30.3. All those in favor? That carries. Okay, next item is 30.4, addition of new materials to the city's waste diversion programs. Again, I don't know if we have a speaker on that, do we? No? Okay, so is there any questions of staff? If not, I have a quick question. My question would just be related to I guess this kind of responsibility of the producer, and the province hasn't really come full circle on that. So my impression of this report is you're trying to move this forward without, in absence of the province actually formalizing policy around that. Would that be a correct observation?
That's correct, Madam Chair. Basically doing what we can do until the province gets into a position to do what ultimately should be done.
Okay, and so what does this do for the city, and what impact does this have on producers? going forward, this policy that you're asking us to adopt?
So what this does for the city is it basically aligns us with the extended producer framework, which is where the entire province is going, where the producers of a product or a package are responsible for the financial cost of managing that package at the end of its life. And for the city, what that does is it takes some of the financial burden off the city for managing those packaging, in particular some of the problematic packaging that we see, and puts that back onto the producer. So the benefit to the city is that it reduces some of our costs moving forward to manage these products. From an environmental perspective, what it should do is force the producer to start to think about the end of life of their packaging and start to change the design of their packaging to support a better environmental framework moving forward.
So basically, this supports the city's policy of really supporting a circular economy.
Absolutely. This is entirely consistent with the circular economy.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Happy to be back.
He's back.
Do we have any idea as to when we can hear from the province on this?
Well, through you, Madam Chair, we've been working with Stewardship Ontario and the Resource Recovery and Productivity Authority, REPRA, for the last year and a half, almost 2 years now, on trying to move this forward. It basically stalled in about January of this year, and all sort of signs point towards let's see what happens through a provincial election and see whether this comes back or not. So from a provincial perspective, it seems to have stalled. From a municipal perspective, municipalities are all aligned, and we actually have a working group where we are drafting the legislation ourselves so that we'll be in a position to draft the legislation for the province and give them something that we would be willing to support.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, a question from Councillor Mamalidi.
So we just had a report, I think it was last month, on the problems that exist with contamination in our recycling bins. These products that we're trying to get the manufacturers to change and adhere to, could they get contaminated like everything else that we can't use?
Through you, Madam Chair, in some cases these products are defined as contamination.
No, I get that, but one of our biggest issues that we're facing in Toronto is that even if some of our products have stains on them or coffee grinds or food on them, that you can't recycle them. So what's the difference between last month's report and this one? I'd assume that these could get, whatever manufacturers make, they could still get contaminated if they're mixed in with food.
That's correct, through you, Madam Chair. What the last report and this report is basically an add-on to the last report, where this is talking about new materials that we're constantly being asked to add to the Blue Box program. The last report was about sort of current state of the union on the Blue Box itself. This is about potentially adding new materials and what would be required.
I guess my question is, shouldn't we be dealing with stopping the issue of contamination before we add even more things that might be contaminated and can't get recycled anyway? Shouldn't we be dealing with that first before we venture into other things?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, I completely agree with that. Unfortunately, we are constantly being pressured as our members of council to add new products into the system. So what this does is create a policy framework so that when we get pressured to do something like that, there's a more clear response back as to how we would go about doing that. But certainly our efforts right now are focused on reducing the contamination in the current system and the current Blue Box the way it stands.
So one of my issues is that people's garbage recycling is being rejected because of contamination. That the people are picking it up clearly see that there's a problem with it and they just leave it. And then they have to put the bag into a garbage bag in order for it to get picked up the week after. Like, why are we adding more stuff onto this if we have an issue with how we're recycling right now? Who's putting pressure on you?
Through you, Madam Chair, we're not proposing to add anything at this point. Certainly, I don't think we're in a position from an environmental perspective because of contamination or financially to add anything.
It says receipt, right?
This is just to receive. This is just to provide clarity on something, on an authority that already exists.
But who's putting pressure on you to add?
Well, there's constant pressure coming from industry with new packaging coming into place. The coffee pod debate that we had a few weeks ago is a good example of where industry is constantly coming to us saying, we want you to add us to your Blue Box program. And up to prior to this report coming forward, it was really the authority was delegated to me to say yes or no, and then bring forward a budget report that said, here's what the impact is. What this does is clearly define what the process is to add those, and then transferring the financial cost of adding those back to the producer, to the coffee pod industry in this example, to say, if you want in our system, we will look at how that might happen, but ultimately you're going to be financially responsible for your costs.
But what they're going to say to you is, fine, we'll do that, but you're not going to be able to recycle much of this anyway because it's going to hit food, and you can't recycle it anyway because you have an issue with contamination in your own recycling policy.
Well,
so what is the point until we resolve that issue?
Well, the point is that right now I'm not really willing to entertain adding any new materials to the system. I don't think we should be doing that until we get the current system in check. Unfortunately, there's advertising, and to go back to the coffee pod industry example again, they're already advertising they're recyclable. So that material's already showing up in our Blue Box. What this would allow us to do is to go through a process and potentially at the end actually say, yes, that is allowed in our system, but now we can actually transfer the cost of managing that back onto the coffee pod industry rather than adding it to our costs as contamination, which is even more expensive.
Okay. Councillor Holiday.
Just along that line, if a producer enters an agreement with us to pay us money to essentially use our waste system, do we retain full rights to exercise an option to ban the product if we're not happy? And will we be pushed back from the producer to say, well, you know, I'm paying you this fee, you have to take it?
That's, through you, Madam Chair, those are things that we're working through legal right now to work out exactly what the terms and conditions of what that agreement would be.
Do you think we're in a stronger position, though, than we are today, though, to at least accept the money so that we can try to deal with problems?
Yes, I think we are, certainly we are in a position to accept that money. And certainly we have, I would say, fairly significant control over the terms around how that material would be accepted into our program, how it would be processed, and at what point, if it's not working, that we would start to reject that material again.
And you as general manager set the price?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, we would set the price.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions of staff? Then I would move to adopt the staff recommendation. And I would just say a few words that basically we as a city have an overarching goal to support the circular economy through the extended producer responsibility. And while I would very much like to see, after many meetings, both from my office and staff, we'd like to see the province moving forward toward extended responsibility, the producer responsibility model. That's not happening. It's moving very slowly, and I understand, you know, it's a collaboration and all the municipalities in the province have to be involved. So I understand it's a very challenging process. Having said that, I would have liked to have seen it wrapped up by now. Now we've had a change of government, so we're not sure what to anticipate, but the bottom line is our staff are taking a leadership role, and I'm very pleased to see solid waste management services tackle this head on. We've had many discussions about coffee pods and all sorts of other misleading advertisers, and it's not fair to the consumer, it's not fair to residents, and so it's great to see our city taking a leadership role with this policy, and I think other municipalities are really waiting with bated breath to see what we do today and what council does with this as it goes through the process. Because Toronto's implementation of this, I think, is something that could be really a best practice and something that other municipalities may steal this model. So I believe the new process to add new materials to the city's waste diversion program is very important, and hopefully this will be very successful. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank Solid Waste Management Services because they've worked very hard on this. And when the brakes were put on at the province, they've taken this on and made it their own. So congratulations to Toronto once again being leaders. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you. I just want to echo that staff is doing a phenomenal job, really proud of them. and, you know, keeping Toronto as a leader in waste diversion. And I'm looking forward to discussing plastics in July.
Ooh,
Stay tuned. Thanks.
hot topic. Okay, other speakers?
Thank God there's only one meeting left.
No other speakers?
Yeah,
You're welcome.
Councillor Mamalidi,
no, you know what? No, it's okay.
you're okay? Okay. So all those in favor of staff recommendations, that carries. And we will move on to our next item, which is PW 30.5. We have a speaker on this item. It's Hamish. Come back up, Hamish. This is Vision Zero Road Safety Plan, designation of community safety zones around elementary schools. Go ahead.
My goodness, this is zipping right along. I am supportive of Vision Zero, and especially in the school zone, so this seems to be a pretty darn good idea, though it isn't necessarily where we're getting injured and killed. I would urge you to actually work on that for sure throughout the city. The one nice thing about Vision Zero, at least theoretically, the facts should matter. Street Fight from Jeanette Sadik-Khan from New York, who did an awful lot of good down there. That was the thing that the mayor at Mr. de Blasio insisted upon, was making sure that everything was done by fact. In facts we trust, I think, was the quote that I heard. We don't necessarily seem to respect facts up here. Not just the Scarborough subway extension, but there's that pattern of harm and crash on the major core roads in the old city that I think we still need to actually do a lot more on. And I bumped into Councillor Wong Tam on the way up here and asked her politely about that little bit of Bloor Street between Church and Sherbourne, and she says she's been working on it since 2011. And it might be $25,000 to repaint it for the lane lines, and I'm sorry, it's subway relief as well. So 5, 6, 7 years to get to something that was in the bike plan from 2001, and being the only little bit that we, survived the from the 1992 recommendation for Bloor Danforth. It takes a long time to get scant done here. So with what's proposed here, I think it's a good idea, but the odds are pretty high, I'm afraid, that it may be more tepid than what European standards might be. Here's something from, I think, 1992, Better and Safer Streets Through Traffic Calming. This is not a new concept here to actually provide real changes to the streets. Sometimes we can do cheap things. I think that rather than working with the expensive pavements and the pavement treatments, I think that's where we need to be going. Also, Le Temps des Rues, also I think from 1992. A lot of opportunities to do things differently. So yes, for instance, the fire truck access, well, maybe we need smaller fire trucks. This is not new stuff. We know how to do this theoretically. So come on, let's actually get into a lot of serious reduction of speed and constraint upon the motor vehicles. And that actually, the disparity between traffic calm zones and residential zones is something that I think should be looked at again. Yes, thank you very much for lowering speed limits on many of the side streets and some of the main streets of the old core. But to really start to make a difference on the Vision Zero, we have to reduce the main streets' speeds, because it also sets up a bunch of expectations that, hey, the motorists can actually continue to drive quickly. And it's really old stuff that the faster you go, the odds are greater that if somebody is struck, they will not survive. I'm hoping that this item goes beyond ward-by-ward safety. We have to do this everywhere. As a cyclist, I'm tired of having the network kind of disappear as you go to a different ward. We have to do a lot more. And it's not that speeding very quickly is, beyond 30 kilometers an hour is really such a great thing. When cars were still fresh to the cities, let me find the best. The court held that a speed of 30 kilometers an hour was indeed excessive, and an automobile was in fact a carriage or vehicle. So we've managed to really get twisted over the century of cars. They kill a lot of people. People don't mean to be careless, but we've got to make sure that we slow down things everywhere and start saving lives. Not just in the school zones. School zones are a great place to start, but the kill rate, quite honestly, has been pretty severe and almost depressing. So I hope you can do this, but oh yes, and in the street fight, by the way, this has gone pretty global. Toronto did get a mention. Here we are, there's the Jarvis removal of the bike lane, which I wasn't that much in support of to begin with. I think we needed bluer where the crash stats showed us we had the harms. But yes, Toronto's reputation has gone global, not in just the Bikes versus Cars movie. Please do this and more.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none. Any questions for staff on this item? Yes, we're on Vision Zero. We're on the community safety zones and elementary schools. So Councillor Holyday, who wants to go first? Doesn't matter to me. Okay.
Quick. Thanks for the report. I spent a little while going through, I guess, the big volume, the appendix. Can someone talk to me about the process going forward to adjust these over time? Because I know it's a lot of work to get them into the report, and I think if councillors have a little bit of time to talk to the schools and the community, there'd be a little stretch here, a little tuck here to fine-tune the zones that have been defined in this first cut. And if you can just talk about the process going forward on that, that would be helpful.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. We did the first cut of these as you appropriately described and wanted to hit every school zone in the city. We will certainly go back as we get more information over time to expand those. Part of the benefit of the community safety zone is it allows us to articulate a zone beyond the 150 meters in front of each school. In many cases where the school boards, as we partner with them pretty closely, are doing their own travel planning, we're going to be able to integrate that into the locations and hopefully move beyond the locations that we have here today. And that will come. One of the reasons why we're looking for a little bit more resources that we can do a more fulsome review. The goal was to try to get this first pass done, identified, and the signs and markings and speed enforcement ready to go when we're ready to go with automated speed enforcement. And if
Sorry. Do you have any thoughts on a system going forward? Because I'm sure people will want, so I should say councillors will want to wade into this. I mean, there's 735 line items here, and I'm sure someone will have an idea about them. I'm not sure that council will want to see 44 amendments to this list going forward. Is there kind of a side process? Does it go through community council and then to city council or through PWIC? How do you see adjustments to this coming along?
So through the chair, so just to clarify, so the list which is in front of you today is as the result of a desktop assessment which has been done of all the schools within the city, kindergarten to grade 8. What we'll be doing going forward over the summer into Q4 and into 2019 is we'll be letting some consultancy contracts for consultants to go out and do an in-depth review around each individual school. So at that point in time, we'll then be coming back to refine the boundaries around each individual school. Those revisions will come back through PWIC and Council.
Okay, so we'll see another report which further, I think everyone agrees that this is a great start, and so we'll see another report that will adjust all these spots.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Let's say fine-tune them.
That's correct.
Through a consultant who will have some time to get in depth with them. Okay, thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Holyday. Councillor Mamalady.
So what's in front of us is, if it's approved today, is a go. This is direction. We are implementing this in all of the schools highlighted, or the school areas highlighted in this report.
Through the chair, that's correct, yes.
So is there a recommendation to put them in any new school districts, wherever there's a new school built in the future? Or do I have to add that on?
No, so through the chair, so these are the current schools, kindergarten to grade 8, within the Toronto District School Board and the Toronto Catholic School Board. So once we've done these schools, we'll be rolling it out across other schools within the city as well. So we'll be looking at the areas around each school. So as a new school comes forward, then yes, of course, we can add that to the list.
So do you need another report to add it on, or does this report allow you to just do it?
Through the Speaker, yes, we would require another report to add it on. So each time we want to make any amendments to the area of a community safety zone, we'll need to bring a report forward to do that.
Wouldn't a motion that says any new schools that are built be added on to this, doesn't that make sense?
So through the chair, no, it's a bylaw measurement, so it would need to come to council each time.
So in recommending this report, are we automatically agreeing that speed humps are being put in? Or does that have to be requested by the community and an environmental assessment be put in place?
So through the chair, just to be clear, what this would do is designate the frontage along these schools as community safety zones. It wouldn't entail any physical measures going in at this point in time other than signage. Physical measures would be as a result of the more comprehensive review that I mentioned, and we would bring those proposals forward at that time. So both PWIC and Council would have an opportunity to comment on those measures before they were implemented.
But if I were to move a motion asking staff to talk to all the councillors that represent these areas to talk about what other measures need to be put in place, like speed humps, and would you be?
So through the chair, to be absolutely clear, as we're developing,
I didn't even ask the question, and I don't know.
Well, I just wanted to, because I
Am I
wanted to
saying something out of
clarify
order?
that we dealt with that at council last month, speed humps. This is not about speed humps. This is about
Community safety zone.
and
it's got a large amount of schools and roads by schools that are a part of this. But I don't think we dealt with speed humps in front of these schools.
yes, we did at the last council meeting.
So staff have been instructed to speak to all of us about our schools? I didn't
Well,
get
they
that
usually do. They
understanding.
usually have they're in the habit of doing that, yes, when it's a school in your area.
No, my point is, I don't think we dealt with it the way I'd like to deal with it today at council, which means any of these that are in front of us, I'm hoping staff would talk to the councillors to see if there are other provisions that need to be made in front of those schools. That's what I'm asking the questions about. Is that out of order?
No, it's not out of order, but just so you understand, at the last council meeting, at the very end of the council meeting, we dealt with speed humps and the policies around that, and that was voted on.
I know, and it's the same policies that we all have to adhere to, but it's not specific to addresses.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So my request to staff is, if I were to move a motion that would just simply ask staff to talk to us on the addresses that are being recommended today, is that in order? Would staff be okay with that?
if I may, through the speaker.
You know what, I may as well just, again, walk out, because there's no point in me being here, because every time I say something, somebody's objecting, or I'm being interjected. Like, what's the point of me being on the committee?
Lou would like to, the deputy city manager would like to speak on this.
Through you, Madam Chair. The report talks about in the medium term, after you approve this, we'll get into the second phase of doing a more detailed analysis. Within the staff report, it does reference at that point in time, they'd be looking at individual measures to look at traffic calming, including calming humps, prohibited turn movements. So more detailed work later. Your motion should, if you wanted to place it, my recommendation to be refer to that second phase of work on the implementation stage when we're doing the detailed design.
But why, Lou? If you can set direction right now for staff to talk to councillors like myself, you could easily write that report without having another. I mean, you already know that there are particular schools on this list that might want pinch points, or, you know.
Through Madam Chair, that's what I was referencing, is that your request be referred to the second phase of the work that's in this report. First phase is just the identification of the zones. We are proceeding to a second phase. To do the detailed review that you're discussing is premature, as staff have yet to engage the consultants and do all the rest of the detailed work. That will come. So referencing your motion to that second phase of work would make sense. But to make the amendment now was essentially say do the detailed design before you started the project.
Okay.
If I could just add to that through the chair, just to be reassured, councillor, absolutely as part of that additional work, when we start to look at the detailed measures which would be implemented or which would be investigated and proposed in each location, we would absolutely consult with the local councillor as part of developing those measures.
So before your second report comes forward, would you be consulting so that our recommendations are a part of that report?
Through the chair, yes, we would, councillor.
All right. Now, in this report, we're also talking about cameras being set up, or no?
Last question.
Not yet? Is that the second phase?
Through the chair, not as part of this report, but the designation as a community safety zone would enable automated speed enforcement to be placed in those locations if council so chose.
So this report could actually mean cameras on the streets?
Potentially in the longer term if council so determined.
Okay, that was your last.
No. So you
This
have
is
to
your
come.
last question.
Well, I want second round. This is kind of important.
Okay, well then finish and we'll do a second round.
So nothing will be put up in the way of cameras on any streets until council decides?
So through the chair, as part of this broader range, the answer is no. However, there were proposals which came forward to council for an automated speed enforcement pilot. The locations of that pilot have not yet been identified, though.
And does that have to come to council? Or is it a designated authority thing?
Through the chair, I'm not 100% sure, but we don't think so. We don't think it would need to come to council, but we would consult with the local councillor. So the local councillor would need to be in agreement with that location being used.
I've got further questions. So.
Yeah, but other people have questions too, so if you'd like a second round, you can ask for that. Councillor Holliday?
So I'm going to, how many community safety zones do we have today before approving this? Roughly.
Through the chair, it's between 10 and 12.
Okay, so a very small number of them. We're about to create a whole bunch of them. Last council meeting, there was a number of changes that went to the floor, and there was further changes on the floor. Could you recap for the committee? Because, and I'll frame the question this way, we're about to create a bunch of zones around the city through this report. Can you recap or explain to the committee that following the last council meeting, what authorities does transportation now have to deal with these community, what outputs would come from those authorities in those community safety zones that do not have to go back to council? So I think I heard cameras, and I heard something about speed humps, but could you explain to us what you're allowed to go forward with now, given those policies and given these definitions?
So through the chair, I'll need a moment to pull up the previous report, but my recollection would be that what we were given authority to do was to establish community safety zones, but we need to bring each community safety zone forward because that needs to be bylawed. So council gets to approve or not approve whether an area is designated as a community safety zone. So we get to put the signage up in relation to that. But any physical measures which we would propose, which would require bylaws, we would need to come forward to council again.
Okay, and do they go to the community council first? So if you want to take a school in this area and you want to put speed humps there because you think it's the right thing to do for whatever reason, do you now go to community council with that report and then to council, or is it straight to council?
No, through the chair, that would go through to community council and then to...
Okay, and then there were some changes that were made that changed the requirements that you have before you can go to community council. Do we not lift the requirement to conduct a community petition? I think we did.
Through the chair, yes. Council gave community council the ability to either say there needed to be a poll of residents.
No, petition.
Sorry, a petition, or to say that no, there didn't need to be a poll.
So you can bring a report directly before community council based on the authorities you got at last council meeting. And we also changed the policy on community polling at last council, so community council can, in the same juncture, waive the requirement for polling and approve those speed humps.
Through the chair, absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Councillor.
So by defining these 700 and so areas across the city, those are areas where that particular scenario could unfold.
That's correct, Councillor.
Okay. And the last question, because I know it's time, what stops a member of council from going before, I don't know, council or community council and saying, I want to designate my entire ward a community safety zone, or the entire downtown core, and all of Etobicoke or whatever? Is there anything that stops that? Other than common sense, but...
Through the chair, there appears to be nothing to stop that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? I have some.
Yes,
Oh, okay, so I'm going to ask mine first, and then if you would like another round.
I do.
You, I believe, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, that by the end of this year, 2018, you're hoping to have implemented about 250 to 300 school zones?
That's correct.
That's correct. That's the target for the end of, the Q4 of 2018. That's very impressive. And so that would include flashing beacons, possibly school pavement stencils, watch your speed, potentially signs, zebra markings, those kinds of initiatives will be put in place depending on, I guess, the context of the school.
So, Councillor, this, through the chair, so this would be just the first stage. So this would be the initial signing and lining in relation to designate those areas as a community safety zone, so that it was clear to drivers they were entering that, but it wouldn't include the physical measures, so it wouldn't include flashing lights at this stage.
Okay, so that's a school zone. That only gives you 150 meters to play with. The community safety zone expands that, so children can get to school safely around the, like in my case, I'll use the example of Bedford Park School. So it's got nice little streets on either side that parallel at Ranelagh and Wanless, but at the top of it is Mount Pleasant, where people speed and there's volume issues. So this would actually help children navigate the streets of Toronto to their schools, to and from, much more safely.
That's correct, Councillor, yes.
You're basically taking those 150 meters and you're expanding them via a community safety zone, which we lifted the moratorium on at council last month.
That's correct.
Okay, that's very clear. And then on the act, the bill, the provincial bill, which I believe was 65, Bill 65, the Safer School Zones Act, that was passed in May of 2017, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Having said that, has it been proclaimed in force, or is there any related sections of that bill that haven't been passed?
So my understanding is one section's been proclaimed in force, but the remainder hasn't yet been proclaimed in force.
So it hasn't been proclaimed in force, and there's related sections of the Bill 65 that have not been fully adopted? So what does that mean for this undertaking of automated speed enforcement if it hasn't fully been, I guess, facilitated through the provincial, at the provincial level?
So we would need to wait for the bill to be fully enacted, the section that applies to automated speed enforcement, for that section to be enacted before we could implement any automated speed enforcement.
So before you undertake the pilot, that would have to be fully enacted. And when would you guess that would happen?
Sorry, just to clarify, so for the pilot, because we wouldn't be issuing actual tickets, we wouldn't require the section to have been enacted. So we could initiate a pilot to test it in advance of that.
So you don't have to have the bill fully enacted to undertake the pilot, but, and that's news to me, so that is good news, and so you can still do that in 2018. You can undertake the pilot in 2018. That's not...
That's correct.
That is feasible. In 2019, to actually put these automated speed enforcement mechanisms in place, you would need the bills to fully pass through the province.
That's correct.
So it's passed, but you're saying there's sections that haven't passed. It's confusing, I think, for people. So until that happens, we can't actually put this in place permanently at schools throughout Toronto.
We couldn't permanently put in place automated speed enforcement until
that piece of the community safety zone. And so just lastly, when do you anticipate this would go through for its final, the final sections being fully adopted or supported by the province?
So we're anticipating Q4 this year, but obviously that's at the will of the provincial government.
And how many pilots would you undertake? Would it just be one school zone, or would there be several, or what is your thought process around the zones?
So the intention would be 3 to 4 school zones.
3 to 4 as part of the pilot. And have you identified those zones?
We haven't identified those zones yet.
Okay, so that's still in the works. But you're committed to pulling this off in 2018, the pilot?
Absolutely, Councillor, we are.
I like all those shaking heads. Excellent, thank you. Okay, so I think, Councillor, we're going to go through a second round. Oh, you haven't spoken yet this round, so Councillor McMahon, and then we'll come back to you.
Sure, I just had a quick one. Just when are we, would you have a timelines as to when we're getting our speed trailers in each ward?
Through the chair, Q4 this year.
Q4?
Q4.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, now, I think we've had a request for a second round, so if we could just have a vote on that. All those in favor of a second round, opposed? That carries, and we'll start with Councillor Nunziata, because she's a visiting councillor. It's questions.
Yeah, sorry, I'm sorry I wasn't here earlier too.
That's okay.
But as far as the speeding fines being doubled, so what would that be? So what is it now? And
So through the chair, the actual fine levied at the current time depends on the speed in which you exceed the limit.
so you would then we would have to the police officers that are giving out speeding tickets would have to know exactly what the bylaw is to increase those fines. The reason I ask is that years ago we had safety zones in certain areas and fines were doubled, and I'm not even sure if they ever were doubled. So I'm just wondering how this is going to work.
Through you, the Chair, the fines would be doubled. It's managed through the court system. So the automated speed enforcement equipment actually measures the speed. And if the system is operating in community safety zones, the fine are doubled. And then that would go through, the system would identify that, and that ticket would be issued based on that fine.
Now, as far as cameras, we need provincial approval for cameras, correct?
So through the chair, yes. So as it stands today, the legislation has been passed to operate automated speed enforcement in community safety zones and school zones. The next step is the enactment of the regulations, which will take place later this year.
Oh, okay. Now, the streets that are in the report, there has been consultation with the various schools in the area. Am I correct? Most of these school zones that are in this report, there has been dialogue with the schools and with the councillor's office as well?
So through the chair, there's certainly been dialogue with the principals of the schools who identify the frontage. There hasn't at this stage, though, been any dialogue with the local councillors.
Oh, there was dialogue with me. Okay.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think that we have certainly gone out and talked to a number of councillors about school zones and about improvements to school zones via Vision Zero in their ward. We haven't made the rounds to everybody yet, but we've been having those discussions, absolutely, and I think we had one with you as well.
Yes, I know.
But in this particular case, we applied the community safety zone designation to all K-8 schools. And so, as Ashley mentioned, working with the principal to identify the appropriate measure, the location of the designation for this first round.
Yes.
And so we'll continue to have those dialogues with local councillors in the community as we move forward.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Carmichael Greb, and then I'll come over to you, Councillor Mamalady. So go ahead.
Thank you. I know, so in this report, as we've discussed, there are other measures that we'll put in place afterwards, flashing lights, and other things. What is the most effective way of slowing drivers down in these zones? Do the lights work? I mean, I know you've had pilots and studies, but what actually works?
So through the chair, it's generally a multitude of measures. Based on my experience from the UK, I would say the measures that are most effective are the physical measures. So the measures which either narrow the road or provide some sort of change in level of the road so that the driver has to pay particular attention and feel slightly uncomfortable driving at an excess speed in that area. So therefore they will slow down.
Okay. And what's the difference between a pedestrian safety zone and a community safety zone?
To the chair, a community safety zone is a legal definition, so it has to be amended via, city council, community council in terms of the bylaw. But pedestrian safety zone is something that's just defined within the Vision Zero Road Safety Plan as an area whereby we can increase the pedestrian walk times, add additional enhanced pavement markings, zebra markings along the route as well too. So it's sort of like a higher designation with respect to that. And also, oftentimes when we're recommending a location to be designated as a pedestrian safety corridor, we would also be looking to see if there's a possibility of reducing speeds and implementing other physical measures to basically get drivers to adhere to that speed.
And are fines doubled in a pedestrian safety corridor?
To the chair, no.
So on the attachment where around a school, it isn't listed as a pedestrian safety corridor, for example, on Avenue Road in front of Allenby and in front, I guess, Allenby specifically. Should that be added then as on top of being a pedestrian safety corridor, also a pedestrian or a community safety zone?
So through the chair, so again, so the list that's provided is sort of the first initial pass. When we go back through each one of the communities with our consultant support, we'll do a much more in-depth analysis to basically extend those zones accordingly. So yes, in that particular location you mentioned, I envision that, yeah, the recommendation would probably be to expand the zone.
And what about private schools? If they request a community safety zone around their borders, can we put that on as well?
To the chair, the intent is to cover all schools, but again, from a prioritization perspective, we'd be taking a data-driven look at that in terms of when we hit those schools.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mamalady, you're up.
So just worthy of noting that you guys were gonna let this thing go through earlier, and then I held it, and everybody interjected. Now everybody's got questions, so it's amazing how it works in this place. I'm more concerned. There we go again. Here, well, go ahead. Go ahead. Say what you guys say.
I held it, but anyway.
What's the point? Just speak.
Because people like you, all you do is interject. That's all you ever do. You know, have your own mind. Do whatever you want. I'm representing 70,000 people here, okay? And my way, so I don't need to be interjected every time I speak, by you or anybody else.
Actually, there's a lot more than that. There's a lot of people living in...
Why don't we just let everybody go, do their thing now, Madam Chair, and then I can ask my
There are
question.
more than 70,000 people, Madam Chair.
No, there isn't.
I know. I spent a month canvassing in his ward. I can tell you there's more than 70,000 people.
Anybody else?
Thank you for being supportive
Anybody
to
else?
Councillor Mamalady. Okay, so,
Anybody else?
no, I think we're ready for you. So if you could start now.
Before I start my questioning, though, I want to ask a procedural question. So it doesn't, I don't want it to be a part of my time.
Okay, well,
And it
we'll
might
stop your
involve
time.
the clerk.
What's your procedural question?
It's about the polling. It's about the waiving of the polling and what that means to this report or anything else that might come forward. The polling has been waived, which means that any report that comes to Community Council that's recommended by staff and approved by Community Council wouldn't have to go to Council. But what happens now with the new changes if the staff don't recommend the report? Does it go to Council or does it stay in Community Council after our changes on the polling? It is a part of the report because I'm hearing that there may be some delegated authority here in making decisions on these streets.
If the city clerk could speak to this.
If I understand, the delegation was not amended at council in terms of whether community councils have the right or not the right to accept or refuse any proposal.
Councillor Holyday asked very specific questions around this, and it was determined that council made the change in policy. So council didn't make any changes on polling?
It made the changes on polling, but it didn't make the changes on whether the community councils had the final decision-making power.
There we go. So then my question is, does it end at community council? And I hope Councillor Holiday's taken note of this. Does it end at community council, or does it go to council if staff don't recommend it? And it passes at community council.
Can I just want to check the council reference, if you can give me a couple of minutes, and then I'll get back to you on that.
I'm very confident it does come back to North York Community Council or Etobicoke or Scarborough or Toronto East York.
Madam Chair, that's not what I'm hearing right now.
Well,
and I think we should
allow
staff to give their answer before we proceed.
So there was discussion at the last Public Works about delegated authority for the GM, and there was no appetite for that. So my understanding, it is going back to NYCC or their respective council.
So I have a very specific question that she wanted time to answer.
As I said before, they did waive, they amended the council procedures to delegate the community councils the authority to waive petition and polling requirements. However, the final decision-making was not amended. So if the staff report is recommending refusal and community council says, no, we're going to reverse the staff report, that still stays at the community council. And
so it doesn't go to community, it doesn't go to council?
It doesn't go to council.
So now it's community council makes all the decisions basically on speed humps and anything else that needs polling?
If it was previously delegated in that way.
All right. Now, I'm glad I asked questions to this, Madam Chair, and we didn't let this thing go through, because now we're learning a little bit about what this report actually means. Delegated authority, another procedural question. Does staff have delegated authority to implement anything? I guess the clerk might want to answer this question too. Delegated authority, does staff have all the ability to make decisions in certain areas with this report going through when we speak of delegated authority, or do we have to have community meetings and consultation with the councillor first? Is there any part of this report that gives staff the ability to just delegate without talking to the councillor or community meetings? No?
Not from what I can see.
None? Okay. All right. So is this list, is this all the schools that exist in the City of Toronto that's on this list?
So through the chair.
All the elementary schools?
It isn't. This is all the kindergarten to grade 8 schools. So the schools which are detailed on the list, although the report refers to, I think it's 754 schools, there are actually 629 schools which are identified on the list.
Does it include private schools in residential areas?
Through the chair, not at the moment, no.
Do you need a motion for it to include the private schools?
Through the chair, if you wish to move a motion, then of course, councillor, that's up to you. All we've done at the moment is we've identified the public schools and the Catholic School Board schools, and as a first step, and then as the next step, we would roll out to additional schools. So
in my case, I've got a street that has a public school and a private school. We're gonna do a community safety zone in front of the public school, and then down the street there won't be one because it's private.
Through the chair, that could be possible, or when we undertook the desktop review, we may have identified there was a private school there and included the length of road outside that school as well. Without looking at it in detail, though, I don't know.
So what kind of a motion would I have to pass to include private schools? Just a blanket motion saying that you would do it where it fits in, or how would I? Because I don't see the logic in doing it just down the street, and then on the same street there's a private school and there's not a designation there. No, they haven't.
So through the chair, it would be yes, it would be a motion asking us to make revisions to attachment 1 to include the extended frontages of private schools within the city.
Okay, so I hope the clerk's got that, because I'd like to move that. Okay, I think I've got my questions answered.
Okay, I've got motions I'd like to move if the clerks could put them on the screen. So I just want to make sure people see these. Oh, yeah, sure, go ahead, and then I'll move my motions. Go ahead, Councillor Nunziata.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to speak in support of the report. As far as dialogue, in my area, I know that the various schools in my area did contact my office, and we did have a representative from my office or myself that attended these meetings. So there has been a lot of consultation. And as a matter of fact, the streets that are included in my ward, we've notified the community on that. So this is very positive. I think what I'd like to see, and I think Councillor Holliday, we spoke about that at one point, is that what really works for communities' safety zones is the cameras. You know, the cameras mostly on the main streets, but I know that wherever we have them on the main streets, people do slow down. They really do slow down because they assume that it's a camera and they're taking a picture. And I know that you know, that would be costly. But I think in the future, I think that's something that we could look at, because I think that unless there's enforcement in these community safety zones, which is hard to get at times, it's very difficult to find the speeders, and as well as double the fines. And I'm glad that we're doubling the fines, and hopefully that would discourage people from speeding in the around the schools and in the community safety zones. But I do support the report, and I know there's another report coming forward in 2019, which we can actually add on other streets. So thank you to the General Manager for bringing forward this report. I know that you worked with me in my ward and with my committee, and so I support the recommendation. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nunziata. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. And I won't take a long time, but I just want to thank the staff for an amazing amount of work. I went through all the streets last night and marked all the streets in my ward around all the schools. And I can only say that I believe all the parents and administration at all the schools that are going to be in these zones are going to be very happy. That there is nothing that parents worry more about than their child going to school, and we've had a very tragic situation in Councillor Karygiannis's ward, and a lot of near misses in all of our wards, and we hear about that. So how we are improving the safety around schools, around walking to school, biking to school, getting dropped off in front of the school is really a critical thing. And I agree with Councillor Nunziata that when we can get to where there should be any cameras, where we're watching the speeds. I was just by Withrow School the other day, and someone was driving their car over the speed humps at about 60 or 70 kilometers an hour. So already when we start looking and saying, where are our hot spots in our wards where there should be cameras, I think we do know where they are. And that's one of them on Bain Avenue, which was a very scary experience. And I know that that is anytime during the day or night, once people start driving around to school in that way, they'll drive like that, whether it's Saturday, Sunday, or Monday afternoon when the kids are getting out of school. So the faster we can move this forward, the better. And I know that for all of the issues in front of us for transportation, people are hungry for more safety. And this isn't an anti-automobile, it's simply a pro-safety, pro-pedestrian, pro-kids. and I'm really looking forward to moving this quicker, as quickly as possible, with as much budget as we need to determine for 2019, so we don't end up in a situation where we come to a grinding halt or things slow down, because that would be so frustrating for the public, which has been on this road with us and on this journey with us. And I know the chair of this committee has made this very particular quest for herself to make sure Vision Zero is realized in the City of Toronto. So I don't want to give up, and I don't want to slow down. I only want to slow down the cars and school zones. I don't want to slow down the implementation of Vision Zero.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. And so if the clerks could put my motions on the screen so the committee can see them. I want to adopt the staff recommendations in the report, but also find a way to accelerate the rollout and implementation of the community safety zones. We've done this before, we can do it again. We've accelerated this Vision Zero initiative in Toronto, which we all adopted in 2016. 3 times we've accelerated this program. And I think we can find a way to accelerate this, because when we look at our school zones, we just heard from staff that they're committed to rolling out by the end of this year 250 to 300 schools. I think that's very impressive. They're working very hard, they're very committed, and so I'd like to find a way to accelerate this, as well as item B on this motion is to ensure that we're including all French language schools. I think a few were missing off the list, and I want to make sure they're all included as school safety zones and community safety zones. So that's item B. As you know, there's another report coming forward to this committee down the road that takes a deeper dive, and so I'd like to see all of this on the screen as part and parcel of that report. So school zones, as we've heard, only really takes care of 150 meters, and that's why we need the community safety zones. I think a lot of people are confused by the terminology, but last week, or I guess 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago at City Council, I lifted the moratorium on community safety zones. This expands the school zones. So this is good news for Toronto. This is great news for neighbourhoods in Toronto, particularly neighbourhoods that have schools in them, which many neighbourhoods do. And if you look at the E's, the 5 E's of the Road Safety Plan, Vision Zero, it's engagement, engineering, education, and evaluation. And the 5th one is enforcement. And that leads me to my next point, is that as of this morning, we now are at 31 deaths on Toronto's roads in 2018. We have to get more aggressive. And so that's why it's the 5th one, the 5th E of road safety is enforcement. And we have to target areas where we see the most vulnerable road users, and that is, without all of us can agree, it's our school zones. And as Councillor Fletcher indicated, in Scarborough we lost a young life in March, unacceptable, and so we have to do everything we can. So the automated speed enforcement is something that I've personally been pushing for a long time. I'm happy to see it's before us. We do need the province to cooperate with us so we can actually implement this fully, but we've heard today, and it's news to me, good news, that we can actually implement the pilot without Bill 65 being fully put through. So I'm very happy to hear that. We can run the pilot in 2018 and get a sense of how this will work. We've heard from staff they're looking at 3 or 4 schools. I'm guessing they're going to be focusing on trouble spots in the city, the hot spots. And I'm very happy to hear that we're going to have a pilot in 2018 and hopefully with the province's cooperation in 2019 roll these out across the city. So I guess my understanding is with Bill 65, which was officially passed in May of 2017, that there's some bits and pieces. I guess the term is actually the passage of it is, it has not been proclaimed in force, is what we heard from Ashley today. That has not been proclaimed in force, and that there's some related sections of Bill 65 that still have to be dealt with. But the bill did go through, and so, like I said, I hope our partners at the province will help us move this quickly so we can roll this out in 2019. So I hope we can get a unanimous vote on this today. That would be really a great news story coming out of Public Works and Infrastructure Committee, that we unanimously support the rollout and implementation of community safety zones, but also trying our best as a city to accelerate those. Thank you. And Councillor Carmichael Greb is next, and then Holiday, and then we'll go to Mary Margaret and then Mama Lady. Go ahead, Councillor Carmichael
I
Greb.
have a motion. This is more just technical because this street was left off of the attachment and the other streets surrounding the school were on there. First, I want to thank Roger Brown for all his hard work that he has put into this and the continuous number of calls he receives from my office and pressure to get this stuff rolled out. I have been to every school in my ward in the last couple months, just trying to figure out what else needs to be done because every school has issues. The biggest issue is speed, and so once we have automated speed enforcement, I'll be looking forward to rolling that out as well into the schools in my area. Particular problem is in front of Allenby School, which is where this is on Avenue Road. We've instituted a pedestrian safety corridor along Avenue, and then this takes it one step further to allow for automated speed enforcement, hopefully as part of the pilot in this area. We have, I've been out doing enforcement with the police and with the students, and we easily catch people going 70 or 80 kilometers an hour in a 40. So Avenue Road is a big problem, and this will be part of the next step to curb that. I think we need to go further and include things like narrowing of lanes, raised intersections, those sorts of things, because I think those are really the only things that will help slow drivers down because they will not do it on their own. But I want to thank Roger and his team for all the hard work they've put in to date on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carmichael Greb. Councillor Holiday.
So I'm going to support the report. I thank the staff, like my colleague here, for all of their work. It's a big undertaking to identify the schools across the city and figure out the zones around those schools, and I look forward to seeing these implemented and adjusted over time. And I think it's very important what they're going to do. They're going to create a scenario where the police can double the fines and have enforcement that really gets people to pay attention and slow down around the schools. But I want to speak to something else that can't be left unsaid, and I want to speak to the arrogance of this council and what we did recently on this file. So there's two parts to this. There's the gasoline and there's the match. We lit the match about 3 weeks ago in council, and the gasoline is adding all of the school zones, and you know what happens when you mix those two. What we did at council was we made ourselves the judge, jury, and executioner on this. We lifted all of the restrictions on the process around things like speed humps that requires public involvement so that we could ram them through faster. And I don't understand why we would do that. I will put to everyone here, you know, we've set it up in a way that a report can come before community council now. It can be voted on the spot, and somebody that lives in one of these zones will wake up in the morning and see speed humps or changes to the road or you know, all sorts of measures implemented and not know a thing about it. They won't even have a chance. They won't even have a chance to speak their mind on this or be consulted. And that really worries me. Those weren't the staff recommendations. They were changed on the council floor. I understand the reason. You know, there was this urgency to move quick. But sometimes when you move too quick, you step on people. And I don't think that's right. I think that the public should go through a consultation process, especially in school zones that are often residential zones and affect the daily lives of the individuals that live in the area. I think people have you know, something to say when there's changes to the road environment. So really, I'm saying this out of caution. I hope community councils continue to take the high road and take make an effort to consult with people if changes are going through. I think there's ability in the system for this. But the problem is we took out the checks and balances through our own arrogance, and I think we're heading down a wrong path if we exercise those. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holiday. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to thank Roger Brown and his terrific team and encourage all of you for Councillor Peruzza and Councillor Perruzza. Sorry, I can't focus. I want to encourage all of you to take part and host a Vision Zero forum in your own ward. We just did the other night in our ward. I think I may have had the highest attendance.
Oh.
And all your schools can come, your parent councils, kids came to ours. It's fantastic, it's very interactive, and there are maps on the tables, and people are trying to figure out what to do in their area. And your residents, of course, know their own streets better than we do, and they can share their stories. And, you know, Transportation Services is happy to come out, bring their whole team and their dog and pony show, and do that with your residents. So I would encourage all members of this committee, if you haven't done so, and I anticipate you care about road safety, that you would take advantage of that and host that for your community as well as other councils. It's phenomenal, and it's a lot of work for the staff, but they are happy to do it. It is their passion, and I really appreciate that. I'll also just add to Councillor Holliday's comment that actually the roads are city rights of way, and it's so we have to remember that even though it feels like our own little neighborhood street, it's a city right of way. And so when we need to do things for the greater good, for the safety of everyone, then we need to make some tough decisions, and we cannot consult on anything. We were elected to lead, and presumably people trust our judgment. Thank you. I think this is all systems go. It's fantastic.
Okay, Councillor, thank you, Councillor McMahon. Councillor Mamalady.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say that there's a lot of reasons why I wanted to ask questions and hold the item, actually, so we have this debate too. Many of the questions have been answered. One in particular was delegated authority. I don't have any willingness at all to give delegated authority to pretty much anything on council without going through a process in the community to deal with the issues of people that live around those schools before staff decide what's best for us. So I've heard today that delegated authority doesn't exist here, not yet. I think there's a push to allow that to happen. I'll try and fight that, because I want to have those meetings in those pockets before decisions are made. That's really key to me. So that's one of the reasons that I wanted to ask these questions. Oh, I'm sorry. I had to pass a motion. There's a school that's been... All right. So that school's been closed down, or is closing down this year, and it's being replaced with another one on Strathburn. So what it does is just takes one off the list and puts the new school on there. And then the second one is to include the private elementary schools as well in the city. Okay. We got an interruption going on here again. I can't speak. No, I'm not. But he's interrupting again. I can't keep doing this. Change my seat. Like, put me over there. You know. I do. Yeah, I do. So. So for me, the school safety zones are really important. We've got a few of them in Ward 7, and they work, but they don't work alone. I think that with this comes an ability to look at every school and what we'd like to see in front of those schools. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the camera system, so I'm not sure how I'm going to go with that until community consultation takes place with that one. And I was hoping that it's not a part of this plan, and it isn't. But speed humps and pinch points and those kinds of measures to slow down traffic, they work if communities want them in front of the schools. And so for me, I'm almost there. I started putting speed humps in front of all of my schools years ago, and they work. But I think we've got to do a whole bunch more, and it's not just the city. And Councillor Holliday's right. The roads, the networks belong to the city. However, any applications that come, even with the new schools, they totally neglect their responsibility in safety for those children. They rely on us to pass these kinds of bylaws for safety. School boards have a huge responsibility to design their schools so that there's proper kiss and ride programs. They can utilize those big parking lots to be able to drop off the kids safely. And if all of them did that, if every school did that and had a priority around safety, I don't think we'd even have to pass these particular bylaws, because everybody would be dropped off in and behind the school in a safe manner. And I think that's worthwhile mentioning, because we're not forcing the school boards to do their due diligence and making schools safe for the children. And this is becoming a huge issue in every single pocket of the city. Everybody's driving their kids to school nowadays, and it's becoming a social network. They get out of their car and they talk about the night before, and they talk about how wonderful the dinner was, and they talk about everything under the sun, and all the traffic is being slowed down because people want to socialize now in front of the schools. Now, I'm going to act like my father here for a second and my mother and say that I used to walk to school, which I did. I didn't do it barefoot, thank God, but I did it. And I didn't have to worry about anybody driving me. It was almost a mile that I had to walk to school. And I don't know what's happened over the last 20 years or so, but it's getting absolutely ridiculous. And you're going to get more accidents if we encourage parents to drive their kids to school. Let them walk, for crying out loud, and let them feel the pressure of some of that coldness as well when it's cold outside, because I think that actually does pretty good for kids as they're growing up. I think I've hit almost every one of my points, Madam Chair, but I look forward to working with staff on all of these issues. I expect to be consulted on this, and I expect you to have community consultations in the pockets we're making changes in, even when it comes to the more difficult issues like cameras and all of that. Please don't throw your opinions at us and say this is what's happening, like you've done with bicycle pathways in the city. You've got to consult with local communities on this one, and I'm looking forward to this discussion in the future. And by the way, Madam Chair, I will be supporting this, just so you know.
Okay, there's a question for you, just on the other motion.
You didn't move the other motion, you just moved this?
I moved both. I did.
You mentioned it.
I did it after.
No, but these two or another one?
No, those two.
Okay, this one wasn't moved, so you better move it now.
No, I did move
Moved
it.
it.
Did he? Okay.
Mentioned it, yeah. That's
moved both.
Questions on.
Okay, so we didn't put it on the screen.
You guys don't listen to me, that's the problem. But I did move it. Go back to the recording and you'll see I moved it. I moved it. I moved it already.
It wasn't on the screen, is what I'm saying, so.
Maybe it wasn't on the screen, but I did move it.
So there's two questions for you. We're going to start with Councillor Carmichael Greb.
So I support putting these in front of private schools. Some schools go from K to grade 12. Would that exclude those then, or is it just if they have an elementary school portion?
I would imagine they'd have to have the elementary school portion. A child is a child, whether they're going to public, Catholic, French, or private schools.
Does that then, with this,
put measures in?
include those? If it goes from K to 12? Yeah? Okay. Just wanted to make sure. So that we're not excluding any private schools that require it.
I think a child is a child. Doesn't matter whether they go to private, French, public, or Catholic.
Councillor.
Elementary.
Thank you, Councillor Greb. Councillor Carmichael Greb. Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So help me, what defines a private school? Is there sort of a standard in mind? Because there's a lot of things out there that kind of are like schools, but not. Is
I'll
there
give you an example? I have a Duncan Woods public school just up the street from a Turkish public school, elementary, both elementary. So does it make sense to pass a bylaw that's supposed to protect kids on our streets in only the public school, or should we be doing it in the Turkish private school as well? I would think that kids are kids. It doesn't matter whether they're private or whether, so any school that's private. I think there's a definition of private.
Okay.
Somewhere.
That's what I was getting. There's some standard out there, and it's kindergarten to grade 8 that you're looking at.
Yes. Be consistent with this report.
Daycares are out and high schools are out.
Well, there may be a school, for instance, that goes, private, that goes from kindergarten to grade 12.
Yeah.
I would include those in
Yeah,
this.
yeah, but you're not trying to add in other sort of things that are out there that are like daycares and stuff like that. I want to have something that's deliverable, you know what I mean?
I don't, in the daycare, I don't think a 2-year-old is going to be, you know, their parents are going to make sure they're okay.
Okay.
But when you have kids walking to school and then kids being transported to school, that's what makes everything kind of dangerous. And now with the new provisions we put on for bicycles and everything else, it's become very dangerous in front of schools. So.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other speakers on this item? Councillor Haperutza?
I had a question.
Oh, for the mover.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Okay, go ahead.
Right.
Go ahead with your question.
Yeah, and I don't know if he knows the answer to it, and if maybe somebody else can help. He does raise a good point. When a school closes, for example, when you're gonna impose a bylaw on it now, but when a school closes and ceases being used as a school, does the bylaw automatically come off, or it doesn't come off, right? So what? How will we deal with that? Or when a school is relocated, for example?
Move a motion right now.
Through you, Madam Chair, we'd have to bring a specific report amending the bylaws and back to committee and council to change the bylaws.
But if you miss it, for example, and if for example, as Councillor Mamalidi is indicating, for example, on Blue Haven, you have what was used to be a public school now being used as a private school by the Turkish community, for example. Okay, in that case, it's continuing to be a school, but in many cases, for example, my daughter goes to a school that was closed in one location, basically rebuilt in another location entirely. In the old location now, you have I think it's a condo development that's going in there. That, for all intents and purposes, because it's a French school, for example, you know, who's going to bring that motion here? Or who's going to do that thinking about, well, now we need to bring a report saying this is no longer a school safety zone, and people could then get caught in traffic traps, right?
Through you, Madam Chair. There would be regular updates to the bylaw required dealing with any new schools added or changes to schools. So you would see periodic reports. So staff would have.
So could we automatically add like a biannual update, like every 6 months or something, to that list of school zones, or do you want it once a year?
Yeah, my recommendation would be annually would be sufficient, because it might be some years would be no change at all required if there's no changes. So, but that's something that we'd have to manage with the school boards, and getting their plans on changes that are occurring, and then coordinating an annual report.
Yeah, I just don't want a situation to be there, for example, in Councillor Mamalidi's area, you know, a school closed some time ago, a Catholic school, and now they're building townhouses on the site, for example. And once you designated a school safety zone, then it becomes a school safety zone and enforceable. So even though the school's no longer there, you have a bylaw that could cause you know, drivers some real grief, right? Okay.
Just a point of order. Madam Chair, I just noticed as well that, and I don't know if this reflects, I'm sure you can deal with it inside the department itself, but Weston Road, both sides between Imogene Avenue and Vero Beach Boulevard, that's already a designated zone. So it's on this list, but it's already there, along with.
But you still need.
Does that matter, or I guess I'm just bringing it to your attention. It's already designated, yeah.
Okay, I think we're ready to vote. So if the clerk could put the motions on the screen so we know what we're voting on. And we'll start with the ones as they've been placed. So this is our first motion. So I moved staff recommendations and then these amendments, which is the proposal to accelerate the rollout and then the ensuring we have all the schools, specifically the French language schools. So all those in favor, let's do a recorded vote.
All those in favor of the motion before you, Councillor Carmichael Greb, Councillor Holliday, Councillor Robinson, Councillor McMahon, Councillor Mammoliti, Councillor Perruzza. That motion carries.
Okay, the next amendment is Councillor Carmichael Greb's. All those in favor, opposed, that carries. And the next motion is Councillor Mammoliti's. And he's got two. This is the first one. All those in favor, opposed, that carries unanimously. And the last motion, I believe, again, Councillor Mammoliti's, related to safety zone extension of the frontages. All those in favor, that carries unanimously. And then adopting the item as amended. All those in favor, do we have to do a recorded vote on that? No, it's unanimous. I saw lots of arms in the air. Excellent work. Okay, again, thank you to our staff in transportation for all their work in fast tracking and streamlining and accelerating. Very exciting to see all this come to fruition. So our next item is PW 30.6. It's the cycling network plan for York University, Downsview, and other neighborhoods. We have one speaker, and that's Hamish Wilson. You can start.
My goodness, I don't know if this is a record public.
It is indeed.
Meeting, but my goodness, we're moving along quickly. Just to backtrack a little bit, there was a question from Carmichael Greb about what was most effective about, actually reducing speeds, et cetera, and the response was on physical measures. This is another physical measure from the mid-1990s, how to make the streets safe. From the United Arab Emirates. The Emirate recently found a way to cut road deaths. It began punishing reckless drivers with 50 lashes in a public square. In the first 6 weeks, road deaths dropped to 0 compared to 6 in the previous 6 weeks. That is another question about how we actually enforce transgressions, especially in terms of road deaths. It's just appalling that there's relatively scant.
It's funny, I never saw you as a lasher.
True communism.
Well, who will get the lash word in, I wonder, eh?
We just chop their heads off.
Well, I don't know that that's communism, Councillor. I think it's autocratic. And I don't know that the UAR would call themselves communists, and I don't think the rest of the world would either. It's where we get a lot of our oil from. It is autocratic, but in some ways we're autocratic here as well in terms of rule by automobiles, and now we have another autocrat, I think, at Queen's Park. To return to the item, this is something, and I do support it, but it feels like it's just a small amount of what needs to be done, quite honestly. We are still not having a network, and as you probably know, I'm a little bit biased towards the core. The bulk of our cyclists, 2/3 or so, according to the 2001 bike plan, are in the core. And it doesn't mean to say that we don't need to do things out in the suburbs. We absolutely do, because in fact the speeds are higher. I'm wondering, geez, if we really wanted to actually reduce speeds and promote cycling on the road instead of the sidewalks, should we not drop those bike symbols down on every single curb lane on all the main streets everywhere throughout the wards? Because we don't necessarily want the cyclists on the sidewalks. That can be conflict and sometimes results in the death of a pedestrian, unfortunately. So we do have gaps, sometimes great gaps, sometimes small gaps. Certainly in the core, we have lots of gaps. I note in Hamilton, they've marked some of the gaps with little exclamation points in yellow triangles. I think that on their bike map, I think that's something we could learn from Hamilton, I think. We have a lot of gaps in the core in terms of making it smooth and safe for everybody. So there's a lot of fine-tuning work that needs to be done. Out in Scarborough, you look at the 2001 bike plan, my goodness, there was a huge network proposed on road, and we've maybe done 5–10% of it. And it's such a shame. You think about what the cost of the Scarborough subway extension is. If it gets new riders, it'll be at $1.5 million a new rider. If we had 100 new cyclists arrive, if they had the network as proposed, I'm sure it'd be a lot better deal. This has guided me. I'm sure you've seen this before because I've been showing it for a while. Notice of hazard still for parts of Bloor, parts of College and Carleton, parts of Dundas, most of Dundas, Queen and King. There's a consistent pattern of harm and crash. It'd be really, really nice to actually move on it. I've been, as you know, very focused on that little part of Bloor. And it's just so frustrating that we don't actually manage to get the concept of bikeways as transit relief. And that's especially appropriate for Bloor, I feel. We're talking about the viaduct there, as part of this item. The viaduct lanes lead into Bloor and Sherbourne, and then it disappears. It's into rubble. It's a dangerous gauntlet in the 2001 bike plan. It'd take $20,000, $25,000 to repaint it for simple paint. Why can't we move on this? It's so very frustrating. Notice of hazard about overcrowding on the Bloor-Yonge interchange as well as the Danforth line. This would be a bikeway relief here, would be something to actually relieve it, and it'd be cheap. Maybe that's the problem. With the viaduct itself, I'm actually, like the bollards are nice, but where they're really needed is more on the curve because the rightwards car, the rightwards turn, they always cut into the corners. So that's where they're really needed and not so much on the straightaway because it's a little bit tight for slowers to have a faster cyclist past a slower cyclist. So I'm not totally convinced that those bollards on the straightaways are really so helpful. And in terms of the viaduct, this is another old pet peeve, I suppose. You're rotting out the viaduct. Could we please actually fix the seal, like seal the gutter so that the bridge doesn't rot out? I'm sure there are other things. Oh yes, Henry Gold had a post on his site, TDA Global Cycling, after the last road death. He said, I have more fears, the title of it was, I have more fear cycling in Toronto than anywhere else in the world. Quote, the most dangerous thing in my life is commuting by bike in Toronto. Yes, sir.
Thanks. Is there any questions for Hamish? No questions. Thank you, Hamish. Okay, so any questions for staff? Yeah. Go ahead.
The type of consultation that took place here, you've got a network of bicycles going through these communities. Did every resident in that pocket get an opportunity to a public consultation meeting of some sort? And was it in the local community or was it at downtown Toronto where people can't really make it to meetings?
Through the chair, indeed, we did public consultation in the communities. There was a circulation of a notice to 40,000 people, and 3 meetings were held within the study area. We had over 100 people attend those meetings. So over 100 people. Did you have one meeting to deal with all of these ward issues? Through the chair, no. There were 3 separate meetings held within the area.
There weren't individual ward consultation meetings?
There were, that's correct.
There were or there weren't?
There were.
So each ward had their own public consultation?
Through the chair, yes, Councillor. There were 3 public meetings. I will pull up the locations of those, but they were held in each of the 2 wards affected by this proposal.
Yeah, but this report deals with, what, 6 different wards? You just said there's 3 public consultation meetings, but there are a number of different wards that this is associated to. There's 6, Ward 8, 9, 11, 13, 29, and 30.
Through the chair, 2 of the locations are just housekeeping amendments in relation to existing approvals that council's already made, just bylaw changes. There were meetings held in Councillor Fletcher's ward as well as in Councillor Audjamari and Councillor Perutz's ward.
So those residents all got notice that there was going to be a bicycle path put in front of their homes and only 100 people showed up?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. There was also an opportunity to respond to an online survey, and meetings were held with major stakeholders in the area, like York University, Rogers, the Tennis Canada site, etc.
So the 3 wards that you're talking about, only 100 people showed up?
Sorry, for clarification, Councillor, the meetings, the 3 meetings that were held as part of the Downsview and York University sites, over 100 people came to those meetings. There were also community consultations that were held in Councillor Fletcher's ward that were separate from that count.
I'm just having a hard time understanding. There were Aljamari, Peruzza, and was there 2 communities?
3 study areas.
Only 100 people came out to those community meetings, and now we're about to venture into putting bicycle lanes on all their communities with only 100 people coming to those meetings.
Through the chair, there was sufficient notification that was put out to the communities affected by these proposals. And we do note that while the attendance at those meetings was only in the range of about 150 people or so, the impacts on the people who live on those streets are actually quite minor, and the proposals are quite clear. The amount of parking reduced is very minor, and it accommodates the existing parking demand.
Could you give me the list of participants in that meeting? Did they even live in those wards, or were there people parachuted into that meeting to help? I don't know. Is it possible to get a list of the people that actually attended that meeting?
Through the chair, there would be sign-in sheets, but those tend to be restricted in terms of where they can be circulated to because of privacy.
So the public can't find out who went to those meetings?
No, Councillor. There are privacy regulations in place for those sorts of requests.
How many staff made up the 100 people that were there?
Through the chair, those numbers would exclude staff.
To speak.
Councillor Holiday actually would like to ask questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How many of the proposed new cycling routes require the removal of on-street or, I guess, live lanes?
Through the chair, only one that is being proposed in this report, the Shoreham Drive proposal.
Shoreham Drive. All the others do not. I think there was some parking, but none of the other proposals require the removal of lanes.
That's correct.
Okay. So Shoreham Drive, what's the rationale for the conversion of a live lane to a dedicated cycle track?
Through the chair, the rationale is to provide cycling connectivity to York University, a major destination. One part of that connection provides a direct connection between the Black Creek Trail and York University. So it's a protected connection between the Black Creek Trail and the commuter campus.
The Black Creek Trail and the center of the campus. So why choose a cycle track over a bicycle lane?
Through the chair, that was part of the consultation. The community was asked about what the preference would be, and then the stakeholders in the area were consulted on that as well.
So the stakeholders wanted a bicycle lane. Sorry, excuse me, the stakeholders wanted a cycle track, not a bicycle lane.
The stakeholders in the community were in favor of a protected cycle track instead of a painted bicycle lane.
Am I correct that there's 9,000 vehicles per day on that road?
The total number of vehicles per day is approximately 9,000, yes.
And it is supposed to be, so the section that is between Black Creek and the campus is 40 kilometers an hour, but there's a note in here that says it's likely going to become a complete 40 kilometer an hour street because there's a report going to North York Community Council.
That's correct. There's a section of Shoreham closer to Jane that is currently posted at 50 kilometers an hour, and we propose to consistently set it at 40 kilometers an hour.
Okay. Is there any reason why there could not be a off-street bicycle infrastructure or bicycling lanes on that road?
Through the chair, that's certainly a design option that's considered in some cases, and part of this report involves the connection to Shoreham Drive on Murray Ross Parkway with a multi-use trail in the boulevard. In the case of Shoreham, the existing boulevard width is not sufficient for that sort of facility.
And I'm sorry, the last one, the existing boulevard, is not, oh, that's not wide enough for the off-street? Okay. And what was the connection point outside of the York University campus? So you've got the trail in the Black Creek, right, and then into the campus. Is there any other connection points that this cycle track connects to?
So on the campus, the Pond Road has a cycling facility.
I got that, yep.
And it would connect to the Black Creek Trail, which brings people south.
Okay.
And a Murray Ross Parkway Trail bringing people north towards Steeles.
Okay, but there's no other connections?
Not at the present time, no.
Okay, and then are there any other options for cyclists using the network of cycling infrastructure to connect to the Black Creek Trail or Murray Ross Parkway?
It would depend on where that cyclist is coming from. This provides a connection from the west, so the Jane and Finch community and south of there, into the campus via Shoreham Drive.
Okay, but the Jane and Finch community would have to navigate Jane Street or Finch or...
Or the Black Creek Trail.
Or the Black Creek Trail. Okay, and there are other connection points, though, of the inter-campus bicycle trails to the Black Creek Valley.
Through the chair, that's correct. So this report is proposing connections on Evelyn Wiggins Drive as well. So we're trying to take an area approach to planning the cycling network in this area.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay, so Councillor Mamalady would like to have a second set of questions. All those in favor, opposed, that carries. Councillor Mamalady.
I'm just stuck on this whole community consultation thing. And I'm just wondering what other forms of consultation, direct community consultation, has there been in the past to warrant this report outside of the one you spoke about?
Through the chair, the broad consultation started with the 10-year cycling network plan. Specifically for this report, I'll speak first to the Shoreham Drive, York University Downsview area. There were councillor briefings, pop-up event at the York University Transportation Fair, 3 public drop-in events within the area.
So the drop-in events, were they maps of where all this is going to go and without a real opportunity for people to stand up beside a mic and give their opinions? There was no mic set up. It wasn't theater style.
Through the chair, they were public drop-in events where boards explaining what was proposed were
It's like, come on in, find out what we're doing, and give us your name, and that's really what happened, right?
Options were provided for people to provide comment. The proposed impacts were identified, and staff were there to answer questions and hear comments. People were also invited to fill out a comment sheet.
So in the local communities themselves, like in, you've got a number of different pathways going on here, cutting through a number of different communities. Did you have individual communities in each of those pockets?
Through the chair, there was one meeting at York University, and there were a meeting at the Grenavine Community Center and the St. Jerome Catholic School in the Downsview neighborhood. So 1 in the York University area and 2 in the Downsview neighborhood.
So everybody signed in. Is there anything that we can get in the way of people that showed up? Like, can you give us information on how many people actually lived in that catchment area of those that did sign in? Would you be able to do that legally so that we know? There could have been only 2 people that lived in that area, and the rest came from downtown Toronto, right? Is there any way for us to find out who lived in that area that actually came to
Through the
those
speaker,
meetings?
I will check if staff asked the question of where individual respondents lived to be able to categorize. I do know that 30% of the people who responded use a motor vehicle, 64% use public transit, 36% walk. So the respondents were a diverse range of people. It wasn't just cycling advocates coming into the community.
But you don't ask who actually lives in the area. Can you give us that information of people that actually signed in with addresses in those 2 particular wards?
Through the chair, I've just been informed that people provided their postal codes, and so we had understood that they were, for the most part, York University students.
Can I get those numbers?
No, that cannot be provided.
Not even in postal codes?
No, that cannot be provided.
So we're having public consultations, we're asking the public to come, but the public doesn't have the right to know who was there.
Through the speaker, there are freedom of information.
Not with postal codes.
So I don't know if the chair, sorry, if the clerk wants to.
Can I get a legal opinion on that, Madam Chair? There's huge discussions, by the way, at the OMB on this when we did the whole thing on increasing council seats and whether or not information should actually be given to the public. So I'm really curious about that.
City Legal could speak on this matter.
Hi, through you, Madam Chair. I think there may be privacy concerns in terms of revealing identifying information, which includes where people live. I think perhaps if staff were able to, they could provide maybe a general sense of where the forward sortation area, which is the first three, in general, if that information is available. But in terms of identifying who, attaching it to a particular individual, I think that's not on. I think that's a privacy concern.
Postal codes as well?
I mean, I think in terms of, as long as it's not identifying a particular individual.
Right, so postal codes is possible.
As long as it's not identifying a particular individual.
So if staff heard that, postal codes are possible.
Through the speaker, we did ask for postal codes, and that's why I provided the mention that
You can
primarily
give
it was
us
in the York
that
University
information.
area.
You can give us that information.
I'm not sure that we could give the full postal code. As the legal counsel said, it may be the forward sorting area, the first 3 digits of the postal code.
Not what he said. He said you can give us the postal code.
I said the first 3 digits, sorry. I just want to be clear that, as it can't be used to identify a person who is in the meeting, that's all.
Right, so the first 3 digits can be shared.
As long as it doesn't identify someone. And I can't give an opinion on that off the top of my head based on the list that was there. If that would reveal who was there by process of elimination, I can't say that would meet our requirements. I mean, we'd need to take that probably offline and get an opinion from the privacy people just to be on the safe side.
So then I'd like to move a motion that requests that to give us whatever information is legally possible from that meeting. I hope the clerk's got that. I'll speak.
Okay, seeing no additional questions, we will move to speakers now on this item. Oh, okay, Councillor McMahon.
One, and that is the difference between a bike lane and cycle track for safety. How much safer is a cycle track to a regular painted bike lane, not separated?
Through the chair, certainly we have seen research from other jurisdictions that cycle tracks, because they are both physically separate in terms of the amount of space, and oftentimes with something physical within that buffer zone, provide an enhanced sense of security and lesser collisions that take place.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we are definitely moving to speakers. All the questions have been asked, so Councillor Holiday. Oh, so would you like Councillor Mamalady to go first, or you? Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like whatever information legally possible to get to this committee with respect to those that attended. And if that means just first 3 letters of the postal code, and there's a reason why I'm asking this. I don't believe that many people in that community actually showed up. I believe there were people from all over the rest of the city that actually came in and said what's best for that community. And I'd like to show that, because I think we're doing that regularly. And I also want to make the point that at these community meetings, the local community meetings, we're hearing one thing from staff in terms of privacy. So public meetings in local communities where people are invited and invited to sign in the sign-in sheets, they can't release it to the public. But in public meetings here in committee and in community council, or in council for that matter, to a large degree, everything is public. So whoever speaks at those events and comes to those events can be shown to the public. So I think that there's something wrong here. A community meeting and a public meeting can't be any different in a local community than it is at City Hall in committees and community councils. So I think there's an attempt here to try and hide some of the facts, and maybe unintentionally, but we don't know who goes to these meetings. And I'd like to know in my communities, when we have these meetings, that they are local people, people that come to these meetings that live in the local pocket, not to be included with the rest of the city and for them to be told what's best for them. And I think that's what's happened here. Now, Councillor Perruzza and others choose to have bicycles all over their roads. I do not believe that bicycles should be on roads at all. I believe there are networks, especially in our communities, of green space, of areas that can be utilized for bicycles, and we are refusing to implement that as our measure for bicycle lanes. Instead, we are taking a downtown approach to the suburbs. That's not going to work. You're going to see more bicyclists hit by cars in the suburbs than you even are downtown. And this thing has got to stop. This is becoming an epidemic, a hurtful epidemic to the city, and a more dangerous epidemic to even those that like to ride bicycles. And they don't even know it. Today, driving down here, there was one crazy, loony cyclist that was going in and out of
Point of order. Point of order. Madam Chair.
Point of order, Councillor McMahon.
Very offensive to call any Torontonian a loony, regardless, you know, it doesn't matter who they are, it's offensive in general, and doesn't matter what mode of transportation they take, that's highly offensive, and I will not stand for it. It's not acceptable in this committee or ever, anywhere.
Thank you,
So
Councillor
I was just
McMahon.
waiting for this woman to get hit by a car when she was just zigzagging.
Is there an apology or anything?
Yes, so we've accepted as a committee the point of privilege, and we ask Councillor Mamalady that you temper your remarks, or even better, to apologize.
To who?
To Toronto and Torontonians.
I didn't name anybody. To who? It was a woman that was going to get killed because of her choice on how she was riding her bicycle.
It's offensive as a leader of this city.
I'm not going to withdraw.
Councillor Mamalady, if you could temper your remarks.
I'm not going to withdraw.
The entire committee would appreciate that. Thank you, Councillor McMahon.
So I don't want to thank Councillor McMahon, because I think that there are some of us that really need to make the point that this just doesn't work for the city, and it's causing more chaos and more accidents, and we're blaming the car for it, when really it's us who are designing our roads in a way that's going to kill people on bicycles. And so there is room for cars in this. We designed this city around cars in everything that we've done. We've put all of our big sports venues downtown, because we wanted everybody to come downtown from all over the place to watch the baseball games and hockey games and everything else. We've designed highways. We've got the Gardiner. We've got all these highways designed around cars, and the last few years, people just want to get rid of the cars that are driving in our streets, rightly so.
Can you wrap up? Your time's
up. And they're actually picking on the drivers. And now I'm getting reports in the suburbs that are bringing this crazy, lunatic approach to North York. And I, for one, will not stand by and watch this thing happen. I have to fight it.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the mover of the motion?
The point is, I think that if you found out, Councillor Perruzza, that in your own ward, maybe 2 people based on their postal code showed up in your own ward, you might want to rethink a consultation meeting that includes people that are going to wake up to these bicycle lanes the next morning after they're put up, that are going to say they weren't consulted. And I, for one, would like to know how much consultation in the city we're actually doing around this, or are we just ramming it down everybody's throat with these so-called consultation meetings? I don't believe it was a consultation meeting. I believe it was orchestrated very much by the activists And I think many people from other parts of the city went into your community and decided what's best for you.
Okay, we're going to move to Councillor.
Can I speak or no?
Yes, but Councillor Holiday's first, because he's sitting waiting with the overhead. Yeah, I'm excited about it myself. Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to provide some additional detail to the committee. I've read the report and I've considered the different proposals, but one stands out to me, and that's Shoreham Drive. Shoreham Drive proposes to remove a live lane of traffic, and I wanted to make sure I understood why. And the questions that I posed today and the answers I got haven't reinforced my confidence in this particular direction. This is Shoreham Drive. It's on the corner of York's campus. It connects Jane Street over here, and it connects the Pond Road over here. And part of my questions talked about the Black Creek Valley through here. It's not the great, and Steeles Avenue is just across the top, just to orientate you on the map. It's a very wide road, and there's a very high density residential area over here. There's a number of buildings, and you can see there's a number of large islands, and like many parts of North York and North Etobicoke and edges of the city, they're fairly generous swaths of roadway. So I asked the question, so, why are we taking out one lane of traffic on a 9,000 vehicle per day road from here to here? And the answer I got was to connect it to the Black Creek Valley, which I appreciate, but it's a really short stretch there, served by a ton of other infrastructure. The downside on this, though, is, these are parking lots of thousands of cars and a stadium over here. I'm not sure why we're going to remove a live lane, and in my questions, the answer I think I got was that there are other ways to do this, including putting a bicycle lane. If this is going to become a 40-kilometer-an-hour road, why would a bicycle lane not suffice? And part of the answer I got back was, well, that was the opinion under the community consultation, was for separate cycling infrastructure. I just think we have to be very careful when we make a decision like this. There's a lot of concerns when you take out a live lane on a street that has 9,000 cars, and there's also operational implications, which would include the installation of flexi posts and the ability that we have to do to maintain these lanes through the winter, including snow clearing. It seems that we've jumped from possibly a very quick and easy to implement option to one of the more extreme ones. But when you sit and look at it on a map, I have a tougher time now. Look, I didn't go to York University. I don't know it like the back of my hand, but I was here fairly recently, and I know this street. And you look at the aerial photo, and I just don't understand why we're going this far with this particular component of the report. And for that reason, I'm going to ask to vote on that particular item separately. Otherwise, I will be supporting the balance of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perruzza, you're next.
Yeah, I was just simply going to speak to Councillor Mamalides' motion on this. There was a relatively famous member of the legislature. He was a Minister of Agriculture, and I forget his name now, but I'm sure it'll come to me later. But he used to love to say, some people are for it. That's not quite the way he used to pronounce it. It was, some people are for it, some people are against it, and I'm for the people. So whenever you have a consultation, you have all kinds of people that come out. You know that you always have mixed opinions and mixed reviews. Consultations, from what I understand, aren't supposed to be political rallies, to stoke the fires of dissent and to hand out the pitchforks and storm the Bastille. As I understand it, a consultation is about, so what do you think? I don't like it. Why don't you like it? Well, because, A, B, and C. Consultation is, I like it. Why do you like it? Because of A, B, and C. Nobody tallies that at the end of the day and says, the for it outnumbered the against it, or the other way around. It's about, sort of extracting information from the users of those places, from the people that live there, insights that you might not have thought about as you sort of make your plans and move forward. So, finding out who actually went, providing that people actually got notice and they had the option to attend or not attend and go and provide information, not receive a pitchfork. So I don't understand what the point is to the, to getting the postal code and finding out who actually went and what they actually had to say and what the tally was and who voted for it and who voted against it and where the opinions came from and where they, it's always nice to get, obviously, a local participation in any meeting and that we term a consultation and actually hear from people locally about what they think of, some proposed changes and some of which are very significant. So York University is no question a generator of considerable amount of traffic, both pedestrian, both cycling, transit, traffic. It operates like a little mini city. It's got about 65,000 people, when you include the Seneca College, that come in and out on a daily basis into a very, very small area. Operates much like a small little town. Well, not a small little town, much, much bigger than Wawa, actually. So, sort of operates like a mini city. 65,000 people in the day, in the morning, and more or less 65,000 people out at nighttime at some point during the day. I think we had somewhere in the neighborhood of, before the subway was built, some 2,400 buses that were just sort of, going into the central part of the campus on a daily basis. And we also know that there are a number of cyclists. So what happens up at York University is it's a big generator of housing in the area, because a lot of these students and a lot of the folks that either work or study or other up at York University or Seneca College live in the adjacent housing in the local communities, live in the basements, live in the townhousing, live in the apartment buildings, live all over that neighborhood. And then in the morning and night, they make their way, and sometimes 2, 3, 4 times a day, in and out of the campus. And Shoreham Drive, like Sentinel Road and like all the others, would reflect that transit of people and bicycles and pedestrians in and out of the campus on a daily basis. So the key is, how do you make it safe for all of them? For each and every one of them. So there's a considerable sort of plan, and especially with the Black Creek, that connects.
Time's up. If you could just wrap up, please.
That's all I have to say, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Huh? Yes.
Councillor McMahon.
Well, I think I'm regretting I'm going to have to withdraw my comments this morning about being happy to be back on this committee, because I can't believe in 2018 we're having this dinosaur-style thinking, especially from my seatmate. We're trying to build a better, healthier, and safer city for everyone. We're trying to allow for active modes of transportation, as other world-class cities are doing. It is 2018, and I think, Torontonians have the right to choose their mode of transportation, whether they are choosing to walk or to drive or to take transit or to bike, and they should not have an elected official publicly disparage them for their choice. I find that highly offensive. And, want to apologize to all Torontonians out there for that, those comments from my seatmate. And, I'm just thrilled it's an election year, and I think we need to revisit the concept of term limits.
Okay. On that note, I think you spoke.
No, on my motion, I want to just make it clear that any information, right, this would mean any information, including the numbers of people that may live in the area. So I don't want them to just share whatever.
Are you amending your motion?
No, if I have to, I will. But the intention of the motion is to get even the numbers of people that live in that area, even if it just says the numbers without the names, right?
Could the clerk advise on what the intent of the motion, given what we've just heard? If the clerk could just advise if this motion's even in order, I'm not sure, because it says subject to applicable privacy legislation. I'm assuming that information can't be shared, given the subject to.
We just heard from the lawyer that some parts of it can.
Some parts of it can, but not all of it.
Right. I'm just looking for the parts that can.
Okay.
Yes. So yeah, I think the councillor is correct. The privacy legislation is still applicable, but there's certain aspects that could be shared, i.e. 30% were in the area or whatever.
Okay. The clerk, a question for the clerk.
Is there ability to get the information in a confidential report in order to protect privacy?
No.
Can you elaborate?
The Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act only allows the personal information be disseminated for a purpose or a consistent purpose.
Okay.
And it would be very hard to say that that was a consistent purpose, giving the information to members of council who are considered members of the public for the purposes of the Act.
Except that the information was gathered for the purposes of consultation on a decision, and if we're the decision makers, shouldn't we have access to the consultative information?
You have access to the information that was supplied. The source of that information is confidential, and you are a member of the public under the Act, so we wouldn't give it to you.
Thank you.
Further, just quickly, so given that explanation, are meetings in here public meetings?
Yes, they are.
And we require everybody to give their name before they speak.
That is correct.
And it's public so that everybody can see them speak.
That is correct.
And that is a must. They have to give the name in this public meeting.
That is correct for the purposes of a public meeting.
So what is the difference between this public meeting and a public meeting in a local community where people are giving their names? Here, the whole world knows they're here, and in a community where they're not allowed to share their names. What is the difference between the two public meetings?
The difference is that we advise people that this is a public meeting and that the information will be shared, their names will be made public as part of the public record. And they are advised before that, and they're advised when they sign the deputation form.
So is that an option for us to have in communities to let them know that their names will be made public? Is that an option in community meetings for us to do?
No, because the sharing of the personal information on our public deputation form, those pink forms that they sign in, actually has a box that says they consent to the sharing of the personal information. If anyone consents to the sharing of the personal information, then it can be shared.
So community meetings aren't really public meetings? Not in the definition that we have down here. Community meetings are not public meetings.
I think public meeting has a very specific meaning depending on the context. Unfortunately, I'm not a privacy lawyer, and I think that these are pretty complex and important issues that I think the motion as worded would ensure that any release of information happens in compliance with the city's legal obligations. But for a more intensive response to that question, we would have to consult with the privacy people.
But you understand that our staff are saying that they've consulted and they've had public meetings on this. And if public meetings are supposed to be public, then people should expect their names to be out there so people know they've come. I know you want to refer me to a privacy commissioner, but I heard staff say it was a public consultation.
I actually have a question as well. We should get some clarity on this.
Well, there's
Madam Chair, I have a question as well, a couple of questions. So a public meeting in the community is publicly announced. A notice goes out, and people gather at a specific site that's publicly announced. The media comes. We all take pictures. A lot of the participants end up on social media as having attended, with very, very broad distribution. If the media shows up with cameras and either video for the nightly news or other cameras for reproduction in newspapers, they just film and don't ask anybody whether or not they want they don't ask anybody whether they or not they want to appear on the nightly news. They just simply edit their footage and put on the nightly news whomever is in their picture. And a lot of that public meeting or that public congregation is made public by all kinds of means. So why let me ask you a question. Is that cool that happens? And do you have an opinion on it?
I can't make an opinion on whether it's cool or not. All I can make an opinion on is that the City of Toronto is under legal obligations which are not applicable to other areas, i.e. the media or other people who are taking photographs.
Okay,
we have legal obligations.
So I'm a City of Toronto guy covered by City of Toronto insurance.
Can you release it?
I go to a public meeting and take
wrap up, please.
And take my cell phone and video the meeting, and I take pictures and I post them through social media. I post them and make them available.
He's helping me. This is great.
So, is that okay? And do you have an opinion on that?
I would not have an opinion on that, but the city solicitor may.
Pardon?
All I can say is that under MFIPA, the city can only collect and disseminate personal information in accordance with that law, so it would depend on the facts.
Okay, I think we're done here. So I think everybody's had their questions answered. We have a motion before us, and we have the item before us. So I know Councillor Holliday's also asked us to pull out a piece so he can vote separately on it. So let's start with this motion.
Recorded vote.
Recorded vote.
All those in favor of the motion before you? Councillor Mammoliti. All those opposed? Councillor. All those in favor of the motion before you? All those in favor of the motion before you? Councillor Carmichael Greb, Councillor Holladay, Councillor Mammoliti. All those opposed? Councillor Robinson, Councillor McMahon, Councillor Perruzza. That motion loses.
Okay, and the next motion, it's not really a motion, it's just Councillor Holladay asking to pull out a piece.
So the report.
Yeah, so here we've got it up on the screen. So we'll vote on the blue highlighted section first. And hopefully you can read it. It is a bit small, but it's specifically about Shoreham Drive.
Recorded vote.
And so a recorded vote has been requested.
All those in favor of adopting recommendation A with Shoreham Drive? Councillor McMahon.
Yeah, it's just being pulled out.
So all those in favor of adopting the recommendation 3 with just Shoreham Drive? Councillor Robinson, Councillor McMahon, all those opposed? Councillor Carmichael Greb, Councillor Holiday.
I voted, actually.
He's not sure what to do.
No, you didn't see, I'm sorry, you didn't see my hand behind his head. Let me hold up this other one. Yeah, I voted in favor.
Okay, I'm going to try this one more time.
Yeah.
So all those in favor of adopting recommendation 3 with just Shoreham Drive? Councillor Carmichael Greb, Councillor Robinson, Councillor McMahon, Councillor Perruzza, all those opposed? Councillor Holiday, Councillor Mammoliti, that motion carries. So all those in favor of adopting the remaining of the report, including recommendation 3 with those 3 streets?
Recorded vote, please.
All those in favor, Councillor Carmichael Greb, Councillor Holiday, Councillor Robinson, Councillor McMahon, Councillor Perruzza, all those opposed? Councillor Mammoliti. That item carries. Did that motion? That's fine. No, we're good.
Okay, that item is now complete. We're going to move to PW 30.7, traffic control signals, Bayview Avenue and Davisville Avenue. Are there any questions of staff? Oh, we moved it. I'm sorry. I did not realize that. So we've got the 30.8, which is this one. So on the pink sheet, improving the city's response to future extreme weather events. Yes.
Is it possible to change the, I just emailed the clerk a little item I wanted to add to this.
Sure, absolutely.
And I just want to give the clerk a second to get that up.
Well, why don't we move on to the other one then, which is a notice of motion from Councillor Perruzza.
Madam Chair, yeah, so just, you know, I was serious when I said, you know, for the last month and a half, I've been canvassing mostly in Mammoliti's area, and that's why I know it so intimately, the ward, right? I'd like to withdraw that and take a different approach to it, okay?
Okay. Yeah. So we will not introduce it then. It hasn't been introduced, so I'm glad we waited. And so really this is our last item, everyone. This is a record. I think this is the first time we've finished this early in 4 years. So this item was supposed to be officially before us because it was directed from council to come to PWIC, Public Works and Infrastructure. So it is properly before us. There was just a quick oversight, or a small oversight. So this is a motion that I moved just because we had such a challenge with our April ice storm that lasted 3 days, and we want to make sure next time we face this type of unseasonable weather event, we have the equipment and the resources to address it. So although it seems like a long time ago now, because we're enjoying sunny weather, I think we always have to be thinking proactively and forward thinking on the next season, winter season. We don't even want to talk about that right now, but the reality is it's coming again down the road. So I think this is hopefully will be well supported, and I'm just really trying to buy time now so we can get Councillor Holiday's amendment, is it?
Yeah, I can speak to.
Why don't you speak to it, and then we'll understand what you're doing.
It is complementary. It is just a drill down on 2 further points of detail. I remember thinking about this and seeing your motion at council, which was great. I'd like to know a little bit about climatic data and trends. And I also like to know more specifically on communication plans around extreme weather events with respect to the General Manager of Transportation. So the chair's motion is broad in nature and probably encompasses those, and I thought I would just point out those 2 pieces of detail that I'd like to see. I don't think it's contentious or contrary in any way. It was just something that I had been thinking about. And I don't know if the clerk's got them, but I can probably read them out. The first is the General Manager of Transportation report, so they would be amended in additional. The General Manager of Transportation report on historical climatic trends, review existing snow clearing contracts and service thresholds, and report to PWIC on any recommended changes. And the second is the general manager, the general manager of transportation, in consultation with the Office of Emergency Management and with Strategic Communications, review the public communications approach to recent extreme weather events and report to PWIC on any recommended changes, which I think are similar to what's in front of us, but just has an extra layer of detail that the report could include.
Does anybody have any concerns with the two points as part of the motion before us? If you've had a chance to review it. Okay. In the jurisdiction of.
Now, I'll add that I'm happy to any friendly amendments if there's any issues, but
There's just a concern that the second point is in the jurisdiction of Executive Committee versus Public Works and Infrastructure. We're just trying to resolve that.
so I'd be open to removing any of the other co-reports if it keeps it a little more streamlined. So I'd be happy to remove bullet point number 2.
We did do something like that with Toronto Water, though, when we had the frozen pipes, and I thought it did come back to Public Works. Do you recall?
Through Madam Chair, yes, we did report back, but that was a division-specific response. In this case, it's referencing other divisions, so dealing with the OAM and strategic communication. So, if maybe the reference is for any communication strategy from the division, just the general manager alone.
I think the issue is that it's the actual communications approach to extreme weather events. I think the extreme weather events is in the jurisdiction of executive. But I would leave it just now, and then we can work out something.
And I'm quite happy to lighten the prescriptivity of it, I guess, the prescribed content to something higher level that just speaks to snow clearing, if that makes it easier, or
I think that would be better.
Take out the word extreme and just say weather events. I'm okay with that. I think it all boils down to the snow and ice clearing, really.
Through Madam Chair, that I think the point I was making should reference specifically, if you want to refer to the General Manager of Transportation, specifically the issue under the control, which is the snow clearing, as opposed to the extreme weather events, which could be any extreme weather event, snow, rain, windstorm, etc., which is a broader issue. So if you want a communication strategy tied to snow events, then change that, and then GM can look at that specifically.
So we're just modifying this. Okay, so I believe now it's properly before us. So all those in favor of the amendments to the item before us, which is PW 30.8, all in favor? And that carries. And we just have another item to put on the screen. It's a technical amendment, changing it from City Council to Public Works and Infrastructure Committee, where this should properly come back to. So this is a clerk's requested technical amendment. All in favor? That carries. So item as amended, all in favor, that carries. And that concludes our meeting. Thank you, everyone. 12 noon, again, a record. And we'll see you for our last meeting of Public Works and Infrastructure Committee in about a month's time in July. Thank you, everyone, and to all the staff for your hard work and report writing.